Let's start with a UFC main event flow that, as usual, has a lot of different layers to it. Santiago Ponzinibbio over Neil Magny, and I think you got to start with Santiago Ponzinibbio's performance and the body of work overall in the UFC. But not that this is a signature win for him, right? Because I still would argue that the Gunnar Nelson win is more of a signature win resume-wise. But this was a near-perfect performance, and he got the finish, he got the bonus, and certainly put himself on the short list of contenders, which was the goal going in Saturday night.
I would agree with you partially on the Gunnar Nelson fight, the fact that obviously that was a big name and that was a huge challenge. Obviously, there was controversy with that kind of headbutt or whatever happened there, but that was a huge win for him. And some people might have been doubting the UFC and saying, well, why the hell is Santiago Ponzinibbio, besides the fact that it's in Argentina, why is he heading up a main event? When you see him fight, and you see him fight consistently, you totally understand why. This is a guy who continually will try to back you up and will pursue the finish from start to finish. This guy, he moves forward. He's always just out of reach of your punches, even against a guy like Magny, who has an 80-inch reach. He was able to out-jab Magny partially because of that hurt eye of Magny. I know he was probably seeing double early on, but still, the fact that he was able to get in the pocket and land some huge shots on Magny, a true veteran of the game with that kind of reach, with that kind of footwork, I thought was extremely impressive. He has that high-pressure, exciting style, and I think he's going to find himself in more main events in the future. Magny was a big challenge. He's not an easy guy to beat. You look at some of the guys that Magny has beaten, those are some elite guys. Kelvin Gastelum, Carlos Condit, a former champion, Johnny Hendricks, a former champion. He is not an easy guy to beat. You saw the kind of adversity that he dealt with against Hector Lombard when he came back. So the fact that Ponzinibbio was able to get it done and dominate from the beginning to the end and get a spectacular knockout finish was just mind-blowing.
And it wasn't as though Ponzinibbio was a minus 600 favorite, but you're right. This is what you need to do. You need to dominate these guys in these type of fights, even though Santiago Ponzinibbio was ranked 10 coming in and Neil Magny was ranked 8. You got to put these guys away as he did in the end. As far as Neil Magny is concerned, he chose to play the outside game for whatever reason, paid for it dearly, Kenny. It seemed like he was in survival mode 60 seconds into this fight, largely because of the jab to the right eye, but shortly thereafter the leg kicks reared their ugly head. It seemed like this thing could have ended at any given time with one leg kick here or there, as Jimmy Smith referenced on the broadcast. But for Neil Magny, there got to be some criticism for the approach, at least to my amateur eyes, as to what he brought to the table in this particular matchup.
Yes, absolutely. Listen, he was backing straight up. He was really backing himself up against the cage, which I don't think was a good idea. At the very least, instead of just backing straight up, he should have been moving laterally or just shot a takedown. Try to put Ponzinibbio on his back. He's not exactly known for having a great guard, at least that we've seen. He typically stands up and trades, and I think Magny is competent enough to do some damage with his ground and pound and with his brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, stay out of the submission game of Ponzinibbio. But and the fact that he was out-jabbed consistently, and the numbers kind of indicate that Ponzinibbio at range is going to be extremely difficult to beat. He has very educated eyes. He's very good at reading what you're going to throw. He's very good at staying just out of range. And as you mentioned, those leg kicks were absolutely brutal. I remember I talked to Tyron while we were watching the fight at the desk, and I said, I'm so glad that when I was fighting, the calf kick wasn't that in-fashion technique because it really is a very difficult thing to deal with. You can't lift up your leg like a traditional leg block against a Muay Thai kick. You actually have to keep your foot planted and turn your knee out to block it. So you got to eat those calf kicks. If you lift it up, it takes you right out. It almost acts as a sweep. And they hurt like hell, as you could tell, from Magny's lead leg. And I thought that Ponzinibbio should have attacked way more with that leg kick. If I see a guy that's hurt, I'm throwing that every other strike and at least finish your combinations with that kick.
Right. Well, see, and that comes back to, and people think I kick your ass, right? But you're going in there to kill. You're trying to break Magny's leg.
Absolutely.
And Ponzinibbio, for one reason or another, loves his hands or otherwise, wasn't trying to break his leg. And as far as Herb Dean is concerned in the fight, perhaps he's thinking Magny Lombard, right? We've seen Neil Magny come back from adversity. You want to give the fighter every benefit of the doubt. Maybe some criticism to be levied at Elliot Marshall and the guys in the corner at 3.5 minutes to go in that fourth round with one of those leg kicks. He could barely get up and he's limping around. I understand the fighter is going to say, Flo, always after the fact, I would have been more disappointed if my corner had thrown in the towel. I don't know which side I fall on this. I didn't think there was any major referee error here, but certainly could the fight have been stopped sooner? Would I like to see more fights stopped because of a leg kick, that renders a guy, one-legged? Yeah, I probably would.
Listen, I think there's a lot of validity to what you're saying. I think it's very tough to win any fight when you have one leg, right? I mean, you could see that Magny wasn't able to really lean on that lead leg. And I think that's another reason why he kind of was just backing up against the cage. And we saw that with Robbie Lawler when he hurt his knee in the fight against Dos Anjos. He basically had one decision, one option, just back up against the cage and try to land a big shot with his hands. He really was pretty much rendered ineffective. And even then, if you have one leg out there, you can only put weight on your back leg. How much power are you going to generate in your punches? So I think there is some truth to that perhaps the corner should have stopped the fight a little early, but they know their fighter best, and Magny was doing a good job of kind of hiding that limp once he got to his feet a little bit. It was tough for him to get to his feet, but he was masking it a little bit. So that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I certainly would have had an issue, though, would not have had an issue if the corner stopped that.
Over-the-top toughness, as usual, for Neil Magny, and you certainly want to give him credit for that, but not a great matchup for him. I think in some respects the odds reflected that, and Ponzinibbio's moving on up, and the body of work, so he's won 7 in a row, and I referenced the signature win because when you sort of put together now back-to-back Gunnar Nelson, Platinum Mike Perry, Neil Magny, there's not a Carlos Condit in there. There's not a Robbie Lawler in there, but it's a pretty good body of work. Nordine Taleb, Zach Cummings, Court McGee before them. There have been some injuries, obviously well documented with Ponzinibbio. But now when you look at where he is, he'll be at least number 8 in the world. And you look at the guys above him, Damian Maia, Kamaru Usman, Robbie Lawler, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Rafael Dos Anjos, Darren Till, number 2, and then, of course, Colby Covington and Tyron Woodley. Ponzinibbio, to your point, more than likely getting a main event title eliminator type fight. I think Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is a guy who's not matched up, would seem to make a lot of sense right now. What do you think is next for Ponzinibbio, and is it fair to say he's a dark horse and somebody that could actually finish the job and run the table and beat your boy T. Wood?
I don't think he can beat someone like a Tyron Woodley. I think that Tyron just has way too much power, and he can also rely on his wrestling to probably get it done as well. I think that's a tough matchup for him. Can he get to the dance against Tyron Woodley? Yes. Will he beat Tyron Woodley? I don't believe so. And again, that fight against Wonderboy, I think it would be a fantastic fight. It would be a true test of his skills. It's hard to say where Wonderboy is at this point in his career. What's his motivation like? With Tyron Woodley still being the champ. Coming off of that loss against Darren Till, I still think he probably won that fight by a hair. But those kind of fights that really can break you a little bit mentally. I don't think that's the case with Wonderboy just yet. That's a tough matchup. I think a matchup that might make sense is a guy like a Damian Maia, a veteran of the game, a guy who's going to test him, certainly going to test his grappling skills to see if he's got the wrestling to stop it, and if he has the defense on the ground if that fight does hit the mat. So I think that would be an interesting match, and possibly Darren Till.
I think the Till fight makes sense. I also think if you're Ponzinibbio, let this division play out a little bit, right? Obviously, in the next few weeks, you have a main event between Rafael Dos Anjos and Kamaru Usman. See if maybe they book Covington against Tyron Woodley, if Jorge Masvidal and Diaz is a fight that gets made, right? See how some of these fights play out, Robbie Lawler, Ben Askren, and then maybe try to call your shot. But Ponzinibbio's in the mix, and if you know about what he went through with the broken arm on The Ultimate Fighter back in the day, you're happy to see this guy this close to contention. And I think he's got a style that really resonates with people as well. So congrats to Santiago Ponzinibbio and also to the cut man Rob Monroe. When you're part of this UFC traveling road circus, and it's a shit show, it is, right? But you get close with people on the crew, cut men, referees, and to see Santiago Ponzinibbio acknowledge Rob Monroe's workflow in this situation and acknowledge that with the headbutt, Rob Monroe helped keep him in the fight. That's what these guys do this for, right? It's certainly not for the paycheck. Rob Monroe will tell you that, right? But he's one of the best in the game, got a chance to prove it in a main event. And more importantly than anything else, Kenny, he got the acknowledgement from the professional athlete that is really what these guys live for.
Well, it's kind of like the referee and the judges. When they do a fantastic job, you don't really talk about them at all. When they do a terrible job, the spotlight is on them to say how bad of a job they did, all that stuff. So really, it is such a difficult job, but they really do save fighters out there. It was a huge part of, my mindset heading into a fight, knowing that I had a good corner as opposed to a bad corner, a good cut man as opposed to a bad cut man. It just puts you at ease, both before the fight and during the fight. And Rob did an absolutely fantastic job there with Ponzinibbio.
Not enough credit for the cutmen and the referees because you got coaches like Raymond Peter Longo just taking all the fucking credit. Ray Longo's back. Let's get to the Ray Longo minute.